Welcome everyone to the show. My name is James Anthony from the James Anthony Report. This is the James Anthony Report podcast. I'm reminded of the Chinese curse. May you live in interesting times. Because these are certainly that. I didn't pick that up from my hobbyist martial arts background. I thought of it because if you're anything like me, you can sense that we seem to be getting closer and closer to something big. And that can be an exciting feeling. When I first saw the drones, this drone craze in the media, I thought about the video posted at jamesanthonyreport.com from almost 3 weeks ago, titled Trump's Alien Disclosure, Secrets the Government is Hiding. And I also thought about the fact that, while the report was ahead of the curve in some respects, I didn't go far enough. At the same time, I thought that these drones were scouts for the impending World War III, something that perhaps the military has allowed in an effort to hamstring our incoming president, President Trump. Everyone listening probably remembers the Chucky Schumer comment on MSDNC. Something to the effect of, "The intelligence agencies have 9 ways to Sunday to take you out," and that Trump has in fact ticked them off. And it's not lost on me that Schumer, whose wife looks like Danny DeVito in a wig by the way, knows and understands the phrase 9 ways to Sunday, and yet doesn't know how to grill a hamburger. The same way that it's not entirely lost on me that both Chucky and Trump fall on the same side of the issue in revealing just what is going on with these drones. Notice many of these drones are flying higher than the FAA's 400-foot rule, and as some have suggested in the mainstream, most are seen at night, which would imply the use of infrared technology. Setting aside our nuclear fears for the moment, the thing that most suggests a black op is that modern drone technology, the tech we have today, wasn't available in the 1950s and certainly wasn't perfected in the public sphere until at least the last 10 years or so. But the incident involving UFOs flying over the White House in 1952, the famous black and white video that has recently resurfaced, seems to suggest otherwise. And remember, just 5 years before that, what was described as a flying saucer crashed in the desert of Roswell, New Mexico, creating modern history's fascination with potential alien life, to the point that Philip Morrison and Carl Sagan began exploring the idea, in scientific terms, in what eventually laid the groundwork for SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. What we may be experiencing now is a fourth turning, a cyclical moment in history that, at the moment, is reminiscent of the end of Republican President Dwight Eisenhower's term in 1961, in which he famously coined the term and called out the, quote, military-industrial complex. The relationship between our elected officials, the military, and the private defense industry that doesn't even begin to scratch the surface of the chaotic 1960s, from which, by the death of JFK, has never seemed to fully recover. I've pointed out these parallels before, JFK having said he wanted to destroy the CIA and Trump's Department of Government Efficiency, JFK's ambition to place a human on the moon, and Trump's creation of Space Force to mark space as a new warfighting domain. JFK and the Cuban Missile Crisis, with Trump having to defend against nuclear conflict in a proxy war with Russia. And JFK having briefly united the country until his assassination, with Trump and his unity ticket that includes JFK's own nephew, RFK Jr. Which, by the way, if you go back and watch the video I did titled The Lincoln of VPs, you'll see the James Anthony report was way ahead of the game in calling that specific partnership between Trump and RFK. The cultural upheaval of the 1960s, where hippies turned the V for victory hand sign into a universal one that now stands for peace. The hippie generation that hijacked the fatigues worn by military veterans like my grandfather and instead used them as everyday fashion is much like cultural appropriation and the woke nonsense we deal with today. The list of similarities go on, and they all involve things like NASA, the Federal Reserve, a man named Elon, and along with the fact that Donald Trump's uncle worked with the government as a scientist and engineer, having also been the one to study the work of Nikola Tesla. And if anyone still doubts that Trump is well versed in the game of politics, just pull up the book he wrote some 3 years before 9/11, where he mentions exactly what would happen and by who. Now, the reasonable explanation for letting Trump off the hook in his first term for the military operation known as Operation Warp Speed is that he was stuck between a rock and a hard place. He'd have been vilified for doing nothing, and even if he did, he'd be called a Nazi. And in referring to the crisis in 2020 as a war, Trump would all but guarantee a second term, as we typically don't change administrations in the middle of a war. But what if this time the war on his hands comes to the point of having to declare martial law? What if there's a false flag alien invasion? One that is designed to bring about the New World Order, as some have suggested. The old saying goes, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. But would you be willing to change your mind? Really, your beliefs, your political beliefs based on new information? Really, the worrisome thing from where I sit at the moment is the unity that his personality, his larger-than-life-itself personality, has ushered in. Because the only things that both Democrats and Republicans ever seem to agree on is more war. More funding for war, more research for war, and on and on. Of course, I do realize that none of us exist without someone standing watch and ready to fight. And I do think the world is a more dangerous place, probably than ever before, and that Trump was the only sane option the last 3 elections. But Trump knows what's going on. He knew it in 2020, and he knows it now. Even in the press conference, he alluded to the fact he knows what's going on by suggesting the military and our government knows what is going on. While Nancy Mace suggested that the drones may have come from outer space, we don't have to look too far back in history to see what might happen. And if you trace those steps from the 1960s back to a secret and now declassified military operation known as Operation Mogul, in which the United States used high-altitude weather balloons complete with microphone sensors and infrasound to detect Russian, or at the time, Soviet nuclear activity. The sensors would pick up sounds we wouldn't be able to hear and reached altitudes of 100,000 feet. And the whole thing was uncovered in the 90s as a covert military operation that was ultimately linked to the Roswell incident that kicked off the alien craze of little green men. Understand that in the Plan A video posted at jamesanthonyreport.com, the Pentagon knows of at least 19 locations of where a potential nuclear attack will take place by specifically the Russians, and also understand that the Russians are not our friends. But with the inauguration of 47th President Donald J. Trump getting closer and closer by the day, you should ask yourself if the US government is your friend. That's all the time we have. Thanks for listening. Check out the reports mentioned here, give the James Anthony Report a follow, and support our sponsors over at jamesanthonyreport.com. Talk soon.
Go to jamesanthonyreport.com or click the link in the description to support our sponsors. James Anthony Report was made possible by garbage-ass people like you. Thank you.